Hello, my name is Monica Kretschmer, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Universal Women's Network Woman of Inspiration Awards, and this is our Woman Driving Change panel. Now, we have a very special treat for you today. We have 4 of our contributors from the Women of Inspiration, Woman Driving Change book, which I have to do shamelessly just a little bit of a plug. It is pure gold. Women are driving changes in our networks and our communities and our workplaces, and this book was just released. It went to number 1 in 3 categories on Amazon, and I have to say I am truly grateful to the contribution of each of your voices that are represented in the book, because that is how we're going to drive change. Now, our panel today is hosted and sponsored by Randstad Canada. We have Carolyn Levy, who is the President of Technology, Chief Diversity Officer with Randstad Canada, who will be leading this extraordinary panel with our panelists. And I'll just have them introduce themselves to you today with Katie Dudtschak, Lauren McDonald, and Andrea Carter. So Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you to introduce yourself today.
Thank you, Monica, and it is an honor to be with all of you. It's just a total honor to be in the book. I am Katie Dudtschak. I am a parent of 4 incredible kids. The youngest is 18. I am a senior executive with RBC. I'm the executive vice president of regional banking, where I have the privilege of working with and leading our over 20,000 frontline employees across Canada. I love what I do. I get to fulfill my personal purpose in what I do, and I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you again, Monica.
Thank you, Katie. And Lauren.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren McDonald. I am in downtown Toronto, Cabbagetown, and I live with a profound hearing loss. I am a human rights lawyer. I represent people with disabilities who have experienced discrimination. I went back to school to get my law degree when I was 41 years old. There's been a number of challenges, including cancer, after my first year of law school, but women persist. And they carry on and get the job done. So I'm really looking forward to being part of this panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And Andrea.
Hello, everyone. It is such a delight to be here today with all of these esteemed panelists. I'm Andrea Carter. I am a neuroscience-based equity, diversity, and inclusion consultant. And I have 2 neurodivergent children, and so this is very near and dear to my heart, and I'm super thrilled to be here with everyone listening to all of these stories that will help us move forward. Thank you.
Beautiful. And our moderator today is Carolyn Levy, of course, President Technologies and Chief Diversity Officer for Randstad Canada. Now, I do have to say you have a special celebration that you're doing with Randstad. You're going to fill us in a little bit more about it, but you're celebrating your 10th anniversary for your award-winning Women Transforming the Workplace program. So congratulations, Carolyn, for all of the work that you're doing, and to Randstad for raising the bar to champion for women in all industries. So without further ado, I am going to take my panel seat and put the baton over to you, Carolyn.
Thank you so much, Monica. And to expand on that exciting announcement about our 10-year anniversary, our program is really aiming at facilitating an ongoing conversation about how we can further empower women in our organizations and really promote their unique abilities, innovative contributions to today's workplace. Through community building and co-creation initiatives, we dive into the challenges that bring an ever-demanding, paradigm-shifting, technology-driven world and reflect about opportunities that women can seize to reinvent and transform the workplace with their own unique, collaborative, and resourceful perspective. I am absolutely so pleased to have the opportunity to moderate such an incredible panel of inspirational women today to discuss transformation and change. Because let's face it, we've been challenged like never before over the last year and a half to really adapt to a new reality and really focus on our passions and priorities. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, I'd love to hear from each of you. What were your aha moments throughout this unusual period? Or what has this really big year and a half of change brought about to you in terms of key learnings and realizations whether from a personal, professional, or social standpoint. Katie, can we start with you?
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. Firstly, on a personal level, I think the first insight is we're all uniquely human, and we've all dealt with the anxieties, the monotony, the stresses of COVID, and whether it's lockdowns or even now where we're not as locked down. So I think it's brought us together personally. And I think we're more sensitive to one another than we would have been before because of the shared experience. And that's a good thing. For me personally, I have better balance in my life than I ever did. I would be one of the individuals that love remote work, not exclusively, but I have far better balance in my life. I sleep longer, I eat healthier, I'm more productive in my day job, and so I go for walks, I get more moments of joy in my life. So to me, those are the blessings for me personally. Probably the biggest insight professionally, and it shouldn't surprise us, but it unfortunately does, is that people have been more productive through COVID than otherwise. And if I look at our business, the statistics of the 20,000 advisors that I work with across the country, they've talked to more customers, delivered better client experiences, and the business results are stronger than ever. And 10,000 of those 20,000 people have worked from home. And so then you say, well, why? And I think there's a deep human insight here that most of us do not want to let our boss down, do not want to let our colleagues down. And without somebody looking over your shoulder and distractions, you will pour your heart and soul into what you do. And I think it's one of the greatest human insights about work that we can tap into going forward, especially around future of work.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, that paradigm shift around trust. And because there's so many programs, I was like, you have to qualify to be able to work from home. Now everybody went, or tons of people went, and we're more productive, efficient, and more human. Andrea, do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, it was so great listening to Katie speak about this, because there's a term in Adlerian psychology called Gemeinschaftsgefühl, which is essentially German for community living. And so, what Katie, you introduced was that it's the ability to see through the eyes of another, hear through the ears of another, and feel through the heart of another. And, when we look at coming back better, this is the way that we get back better. And that realization that we don't want to let other people down, that we want to be there for each other, that we want to support each other, that we want to, help augment each other's lives. And I think that while there is a lot of polarization that has occurred because of COVID, I think what's happening is that there's an intention to start opening up about our own patterns, about our own cycles of socialization, and bringing that awareness to our own conditioning and behaviors. And I think that what's happened because of this break is that we're actually questioning, why do I behave this way? Why does this make me feel this way? Why do I value this? Or am I valuing this because it's actually something I should value? Or is it because I've been told I'm supposed to value it? So I believe that we're starting to question old pedagogy, and I believe that we're starting to move forward because of the conditions that we've faced.
Yeah, and that concept around vulnerability and now breaking so many business norms, it's a wonderful side effect, right, of what's going on for sure. Lauren, how about yourself?
I think what happened is that in the disability space, because I support people with disabilities who have experienced discrimination, is that for years, employees with disabilities begged to work from home, begged to have flexible schedules. We're tired of being dependent on accessible transit that was far from being reliable, getting the proper supports in place, and dealing with accommodation issues. And we're repeatedly told, no, it can't happen. It's non-negotiable. You need to be on site. And so for me, what happened is it very clearly demonstrated the ableism that is in our society, which is discrimination in favor of those without disabilities, because look how quickly things turned on a dime to have all of those non-disabled employees working from home. And so it just confirmed for my community that this is something that can be done, and it alleviates a huge pressure off of people living with disabilities, and women with disabilities are also parents and have other intersectionalities. And so that was not so much an aha moment for my community, but for the community at large to go, oh, wait a minute. Now we see that this can be done, and why 22% of Canadians live with disabilities. Most people work with people who have disabilities and are much more respectful and honoring of why this needs to happen for all of us. So that was the big aha moment, not necessarily for us, but for the community at large, to see how quickly it could be done and how it could benefit everyone to foster that inclusion and belonging.
Yes, absolutely. That's a wonderful point that you're bringing up. And yes, it's an aha moment for everyone, that people didn't think about, how do I work with a marginalized community into the environment that I have? Well, now that all that's been disrupted and culture is not about being in four walls, there's so much opportunity that's ahead. And Monica, I have to pass this to you. And congratulations on the book. It's absolutely incredible. And I think of all people on this call with us, you've probably heard hundreds of aha moments that women have had and men have had. So what was your aha moment?
So, you know, when I'm going to take it on a whole new level here, because what my aha moment was, we've been running a race for hundreds of years. Full stop. When COVID hit, all of a sudden we were given a marathon to run the next day. And it wasn't pretty, but we'd already done the training. Women always had to step up and work harder. We'd always had to be resilient. We've always been, you know, fighting for injustices, a seat at the table, you know, trying to build our businesses, balancing childcare, and doing a myriad of other stuff. When COVID hit, it wasn't pretty. It was hard on all of us, but we were the ones that definitely soared, right? And so I think probably one thing I saw over and over again was the glass was never half empty. The glass was always overflowing. Regardless of the barriers that women faced during COVID, there was always, let's go. Let's innovate. Let's be creative. You know, there was always solutions that were offered. So I really just saw this huge kind of opportunity where it was everybody was paying attention to the leadership that women actually bring to the table and how relevant it was to getting through the storms, to moving to that next level. So it was, we were prepared for COVID because we'd always been working that much harder.
Yeah, I love that. And it's just that stepping forward of so many women. I believe that's why everything transitioned as smoothly in some cases that it could, because these skills that women have and that get down to work attitude and we will be the eye of the storm and make this work. It's amazing. Yeah, thank you for sharing that perspective. And so this brings me into my second question here, because COVID really has been mixed blessings for women, right? So for sure, the pandemic has encouraged soulful reflection, coming to the realization that there's more life, or I guess there's more to life than just work. Promoting possibly a leave from the workforce, returning to school, like what Lauren has spoken about when she was 41. So women who have heard that, you do not die at 40. I turned 40, you can go in and do it, right? A lot of people think they can't learn something new or dive into something completely different. You absolutely can. But here's the thing, some inequities were really highlighted from working from home. So what it means to be a working mother. Moms were working in self-imposed shifts to accommodate childcare duties, and they ended up feeling like they were at work 24/7. Employees were retrained who were laid off during the pandemic, but there's a bit of a catch here. This wasn't necessarily done for advancement, because one person now is required to assume several roles that people had in the past. One study even found that the hours women spent on caregiving jumped from an average of 68 hours a week before the pandemic started to 95 after. Not to mention that according to Stats Canada, among 25 to 54-year-olds, the job loss rate for women has been twice as high as for men since COVID-19 began. So Andrea, based on what you've seen in your organization or in your research, can you comment on what the pandemic experience was or has been or really is for women? What are the positives and the negatives? And has the pandemic provided benefits or further highlighted some inequities?
Thank you. Yeah. So I think COVID's been really hard for everyone. I don't think anyone is walking away from COVID unscathed. As a mother of two neurodivergent children, I'm doing my master's right now and consulting. And, you know, while I'm super lucky, I have a rock star husband. He walks beside me. He does laundry. He cooks. He cleans. And he's amazing in his job. We have completely different emotional roles that have also been socialized. So when something happens with our children, either socially or academically, there's an emotional tax that occurs, and that tax is very different from his perspective to my perspective. I've definitely seen a lot more health issues, mental health issues. I've also unfortunately seen suicide on the rise with women due to the amount of pressure. A lot more addiction and definitely just a lot more pain from sheer isolation. We've been conditioned as women to not share pain, to not share the story, which is why I think it's so important that the work that Monica's doing and providing the space for the story to be okay. So ostracization, social rejection, social exclusion, which were all part of COVID. Those are the most devastating experiences for the human condition and for the human brain. Our brain is actually wired for belonging. It searches for belonging in every situation that we're in. And so when we don't see belonging and when we don't have inclusion, it snowballs into many facets of life. It decreases a person's capacity to focus, and our productivity actually decreases between 50 to 70%, depending on how we've been excluded or ostracized or isolated, and depending on what that story is that we're holding for ourselves. So there definitely was that. Now, let's look at the positives, though. The positives were that women started to say no. Say no to the way we were treated, say no to expectations, say no to dated ways of being in the world. Women really saw that there was this opportunity to innovate, to recreate, and to grow despite all of the chaos. There was an acknowledgement, if you will, that allowed us to have a voice for what we believed in, rather what we were told to say or told to accept. And that is completely changing the topography of the workforce now.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other points to add, ladies, before we go on to the next question?
I'll just add, if I may, that yes, I respect that the women who have partners and have children, it's been really difficult. But for the women who do not, the isolation has been really, really hard. And for myself, living with a profound hearing loss, we've been under masking mandate, which means every time I go out in the community, for the longest time it was outside, but it still remains inside, I have no idea what people are saying to me when they talk to me. And for so long, but pre-COVID, I was able to pass as a hearing person. I didn't look like I couldn't hear, whatever that may look like. But now I was very much reminded that I have a profound hearing loss, that people are very tense anyway because of COVID. So when I say, I'm sorry, I lip read, I don't know what you're saying with the mask on, I have been confronted by incredible rudeness of people turning their back on me, swearing, what? I just, waving me off. And it's just, I've been marginalized incredibly just on the basis of communication. And that weighed you down. And plus the women with other disabilities, they are worried about going to a hospital. Will they be given care? Or will they be prioritized with the triage protocol of you're not worthy of getting a ventilator because you already have a disability and you're perceived as not worthy as much as. So that's been really troubling, very much. And so I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of something really positive, but I end up isolating myself even more because to go out there, it's too much. It's just too much.
Lauren, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. I think it's important to not sugarcoat. I think it's important in order for us to get to belonging, in order for us to get to a place where people are aware. Yeah. What you're saying today is important because otherwise it's just that sweeping it under the rug. And that's what we have to stop doing. So I appreciate the fact that you're sharing this piece and how profound that is and how important that is as well.
I also think there is another side of this that we're going to face post-COVID. So I know many women, several people with disabilities, visible minority individuals, indigenous individuals that have flourished in remote work because they haven't had to face exclusionary behavior in the workplace or with clients. So picture somebody who deals with clients that rolls in with a wheelchair and is immediately downgraded in someone's mind based on their perceived lesser intelligence because they're in a wheelchair or they walk with a cane. When they show up on video with a client and there is no sign of the wheelchair or the cane and they are taken as a fully credible individual. Yeah. There are many individuals, women, as I say, visible minority individuals, persons with disability, that from an inclusion standpoint and belonging standpoint are fearing going back to the office because they're worried about going back to a world of bias that, you know, and having to face those fears on a daily basis that they haven't had to face at the same level from home. I hope that helps, Carolyn.
That's a very good point that you make, Katie, because the ableism is so prevalent that a lot of us with disabilities are angry because it has become so apparent. And I think that's something that's going to carry over as well. The anger that we have, we'll have our own Black Lives Matter movement because it's tiresome and why, you know. But thank you too, Andrea, I've always tried to be very authentic to show that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We all have different abilities and unconscious biases that we're faced with, and it serves no one not to show up and say, this is what my real struggle is. Stop gaslighting me. This is real.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that, Lauren. I know so many people that are going to be watching that will connect to that and the courage that you showed just to say, hey, it's not okay. And, you know, there's an important message here to organizations as well in adapting a hybrid work model. Not only because people in general don't want to necessarily come in all the time, but look at the opportunity that has been created as a result of creating that remote opportunity for some communities, right? In the Indigenous perspective, we can go right on and start to work off the reservation instead of asking individuals to come into work, right? There's lots of opportunities. So thank you for that rich dialogue around that. And that actually leads me really into the third question, because we have seen D&I issues really starting to take the forefront through the events like we talked about with Black Lives Matter. These events have invited us to show more compassion and empathy to people struggling with discrimination, mental, physical health issues, and really financial hardships, just to name a few. And consequently, organizations are trying to adapt and quickly crack the code for D&I. As a matter of fact, based on our most recent D&I study at Randstad, Canadians are expecting diversity. 66% of Canadians workers consider diversity and inclusion important when they're looking for work, that number rises to 70% for full-time workers and 75% for managers. But really, there's no quick fixes. As we all know, when it comes to D&I, there's often a reflex to treat problem areas with a patch and then move on. If you approach D&I this way, of course, you're setting yourself up for failure. So Lauren, can you tell us why it's so important for business to care? And I think the examples that you just spoke specifically about are amazing to lead this into us. And how do businesses need to really take an integral part of their culture and operations and to think about the impact that they have on the communities they involve in? And what was your own D&I journey like? And what were some of the uncomfortable truths that you had to deal with?
Yeah, as far as my own journey, it's always been born out of frustration because people, organizations define diversity and inclusion in different ways. I find that the majority of the time, disability is not part of the D&I conversation. It's Francophone, Indigenous, women, LGBTQ, 2+, transgender, it's about, BIPOC, but disability is the thing that covers all of those areas. And if you are fortunate to live long enough, you will also acquire a disability. Disabilities are not always visible. They don't always happen all the time. They can be episodic. They can be temporary. And the reality is that 22% of Canadians live with a disability. You add in all the folks that you know, you work with, that you love, and that number rises to 50%, over 50% of Canadians that are impacted in some way by disability. So if your organization is not recognizing that, the person with a disability isn't going in by themselves. They are then going to tell their friends and family and coworkers, and the brand loyalty will be impacted negatively because of that. You take a restaurant that someone wants to go to, the restaurant is inaccessible. That person with a disability likely didn't go alone. They went with friends or with family. So guess what's going to happen? They are going to leave the inaccessible restaurant and go to one that is accessible. If it is accessible physically as well as in terms of attitude, then that goes a long way to creating the brand identity. So the two things are, if you do not include accessibility and disability into your D&I platform, you are doing it all wrong. And the second thing is, you need to engage with the people who live with disabilities to support you on that journey, nothing about us, without us concept. And it's been said for so long, it's good business. Why would you piss off 22% of Canadians plus the adjacent by not being accessible? It doesn't make sense. Yet disability is the final frontier of civil rights, where it's okay to not allow a person entry into a building, or it's okay to remove them, exclude them, whatever. So if you don't intentionally include, you are unintentionally excluding, and I have to stop. Sorry, blood pressure needs to come down now.
I love this. No, thank you so much for that, Lauren. Yeah. Katie, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think most of the audience knows, if they've read the book, Monica, that I have a bit of a unique background. I am a woman I am a whole woman, and I am so proud to be me. I also happen to have gender transition experience, so I've lived on both sides of the world, never fully or happily on the other side of the world, but I've seen both sides. And as part of my coming out in June of 2019, because of the size of the workforce that RBC has, I received thousands of personal stories of hardship from different employees. And it was a year in advance of Black Lives Matter. And I felt like it was my training ground, not only my personal coming out, but my training ground for Black Lives Matter. Because what I saw through all the stories was this level of hurt and pain that so many human beings are carrying around underneath the surface with their friends, underneath the surface at work. It's like an iceberg. You see the shiny iceberg on top, and then there's all this hurt and pain that is carried underneath that somehow in society has not been okay to talk about. Well, if you can't talk about it, how do you ever become known and understood and create the psychological safety and belonging that every human being wants? So I describe diversity differently. I describe it as dimensions of invisible and visible human uniqueness. Diversity sounds like it's about the other guy, when in reality, most of human beings possess some visible or invisible dimension of human uniqueness, whether it's a learning disability, whether you were abused as a child, whether you're gay, whether you've got disabilities. Like, diversity is a fact, and it cuts across most of humanity. And if you've grown up with white privilege and you don't carry around, invisible or visible dimensions, you're probably not that worldly, unfortunately. But how do we help people learn, and how do we help people grow? So I describe diversity that way, and I describe inclusion the same way Andrea does and Lauren does. It is all about creating psychological safety. It is all about creating a place of belonging where people feel embraced and accepted for their whole human being, their whole humanness. And unless we create a workplace where you can talk about your unique life experiences without judgment. I run inclusion dialogues every month with thousands of leaders just to profile human stories, and they're one-way conversations. The only person that is legitimate in telling the story is the person that went through the human experience, so that we can help others understand and hopefully create a shared sense of empathy. The conversations are mind-blowing when you allow them to happen, and the release of pain and the sense of being accepted as a whole human being goes up dramatically. So I think it's not COVID, it's the stress of COVID that brought us to the tipping point where all these social issues have boiled over like we've never seen them before. And, I say you either come at diversity and inclusion, well, diversity as a fact, inclusion as a choice, you either come at it through the lens of it's the right social thing to do, it's the right human rights thing to do, or you come at it as a business leader and say, am I getting 100% of the creative potential of every human being? Or are they holding back in some way 10, 20, 30, 40% because they're carrying around hurt and fear of being judged or ostracized? Mm-hmm. And I think we all know the answer. The vast majority of people in the workplace are carrying around some fear of rejection or judgment that unless you can create inclusion in the truest sense, and women tend to do it better, and it's not because men can't, it's because many men were raised to be very cerebral and linear, and many women were raised to be more nurturing and more open, which we've seen through COVID as a strength. Unless we create a culture that creates that, society is missing out on massive human potential.
Yeah. And this is that, you think of the concept around continuous learning. That's what D&I is about. So anyone listening today, if something that someone has said has made you feel uncomfortable, that is the guiding light to lean into why you feel that way, right? And just go and learn. And, we need to strive. In the past, it was thinking of a workplace as a gift. If everyone was able to show up as their real self, then they are going to feel empowered to be their best self. And then that's going to benefit everyone. So I know like we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to keep moving us through the questions a little bit. We just have a couple more areas to cover that I think is really meaningful. And, you know, we started talking about, you know, the definition, Katie, of diversity, right, and what you're speaking to. So let's go in there, because there are some expressions that bring their share of misunderstanding. Two that I think of are systemic racism and intersectionality. So simply put, those refer to hidden biases and discrimination that minority groups face, including in the workplace. From recent focus groups that we facilitated at Randstad with women who are working from all backgrounds, we've learned that a woman's multifaceted identity makes it difficult to identify the true source of bias and inequity. You know, we heard some statements that were really heart-wrenching. For example, I'm constantly told I'm good enough for training and awards, but I'm never good enough for a promotion. I felt more supported by men than other women of color in my office who saw me as competition. So, you know, Monica, I actually just want to start with you on this perspective, but do you feel that more identities that you have, you know, being a woman of color, being pregnant, being gay, the more biases that you encounter?
Without a doubt, you know, the cards are definitely stacked upon us, right? I mean, I look at my own perspective as a single mom. I'm a single mom. I'm an entrepreneur. I have the opportunity to seek and speak to so many different women from all backgrounds, and you know, there's always some sort of bias against them, right, from the get-go. And so that is the biggest issue, is that it's stacked against us, right? And the more that we have the opportunity to talk about it, to use platforms like this so we can share our diverse perspectives, that's when we can educate people about our own personal struggles, our lived experiences, what it truly means to live in our own worlds. And you know, I think that's when we can truly come to change. And I look at the conversations that I had during COVID. You know, I had so many conversations, and it was about that fear of being transparent. Nobody wanted to say where they were really at, right? And, you know, so I think that if we can get to a place about having those conversations more about the transparency and the authenticity, I think we can move those barriers for women, right? But we have to be able to have those conversations. It's integral. And platforms like this are super great. The work that you're doing, Andrea, Lauren, you're getting so passionate about it, but you're being heard, right? Katie, you're being heard. And that's what I think we need to do as women, is just be able to speak our truth and have organizations such as yourself, Carolyn, and you know, putting together programs where you can welcome those voices, where you embrace them. That is where change happens.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, I just want to jump in here real quick, because intersectionality is actually a term that's widely misused and misunderstood. Intersectionality is actually an analytic to understand whose voice holds the most power in any given situation. And it is based on the identities that we hold. So Kimberly Crenshaw, she's a U.S. attorney. That term was coined in the 1980s, and it only became popularized just recently. But it is about voice. So it's really important. You know, Monica, what you've just shared is really important, because when we look at the correlation, and this is part of the research that I'm doing right now, but when we look at the correlation between bias and your voice being heard. Now, there isn't a direct correlation there, but what there is a direct correlation with is that if there is low-level belonging, including comfort, contribution, connection, psychological safety, and well-being, there is a high level of identities. So let's think about that. The higher the level of identity, which is intersectionality, the lower the belonging score. That's massive. We need to understand that. We need to understand whose voice is being heard, including those with ableism versus the disabilities that are not seen. And that's very, very important across the board.
Katie?
Carolyn, I'll just build on it quickly. Your point about hierarchy and clarity of identity versus belonging, I feel it. Like, as a child, my parents were newcomers. They're post-war newcomers to Canada, so they brought trauma with them. I grew up in a house with a lot of yelling. I have an adverse reaction to authority and to loud voices and to yelling. I tend to go, I leave, I disengage. I was a child with a learning disability. They always said in public school, if Katie only applied herself, well, I'd fall asleep after the second sentence of a book. Today, you'd probably describe me as dyslexic. So in the corporate world, deep voices and authority and being yelled at turns me away. In the corporate world, I think big picture, I'm conceptual, which dyslexic people are. But I don't think in the linear, logical way that many people in the corporate world are trained. And then there's gender and our experiences with expression of our gender, from being cerebral to being expressive, and that being judged as soft or as weak. So it's interesting. I have complete clarity of my identity. I'm totally at peace with my identity, but I know many, many times a day or a week where it's being judged or questioned because of my uniqueness. And my heart goes out to people. The unfortunate part is women experience more so, to Monica's point, but there's also a lot of men that experience the impact of these identities and intersectionality as well.
Yeah,
I'll just say very, very quickly, yes, I understand that a hybrid model is important, that work from home is good, but I'm also worried that our identities will then become hidden. That when you can't see that wheelchair user on Zoom, you are not cognizant of the intersectionality that that person lives with and the identity that's important to them. So it's very easy to kind of paper over your behavior when you're not being respectful because it's not in your face, so to speak. So that's the one thing that I'm worried about moving forward, and it'll be very interesting from a scientist point of view and from a legal point of view, you know, how's this all going to play out? So that's just my thought.
Thank you, ladies. And I can't believe how many nuggets and points of reflection and goosebumps I've had through this dialogue so far. So thank you so much for such an enriching discussion. I'll pass it back, Monica, to close today.
Well, I would just like to say I echo what you've just said, Carolyn. Goosebump moments, definitely. Each of you offers such a rich experience, perspective, and Carolyn, you did a beautiful job moderating today. I really do believe that we are in a decade to drive change. I think that every woman needs to be seen, heard, and valued. And I would just like to see how each of you in your own industries, with your own commitment, how you are going to take that action. So Katie, how are you going to drive action in your industry or personally?
For me, driving action and driving change spans my career. I'm thinking about the next 50 years of my life. And to me, it's this deep personal desire, this deep calling to build a much kinder and much more inclusive world. And that sounds kind of soft, but it's not. We will not solve ESG, environment, social, and governance. We will not solve climate change without solving social and economic inclusion, whether it's in the workplace or within society. Social divide is getting too far apart, and marginalized communities are falling farther behind. We have to reverse it. And so for me, my driving change is to advocate for social and economic inclusion and build the programs inside our workplace and beyond that will drive us there. We have no choice, quite candidly. We won't solve the climate problem unless we solve the social problem.
Beautiful. And Lauren, how about yourself?
Well, it's just a phrase that really resonates with me. was uttered by Madam Justice Rosalie Abella, who recently retired from the Supreme Court of Canada. And she is the child of Holocaust survivors. And so she said, it's not just what you stand for, it's what you stand up for. And so for me, a lot of people know that I've been a change agent for the past 30 plus years, but I also speak up. I also give voice to those who do not have voices. I use my privilege as a white cisgendered woman for those who have different intersectionalities and identities that don't feel that they have the power to speak up. And you cannot affect change until you afflict the comfortable, because you need to be the disruptor. You need to call people out. You need to amplify voices that are not being heard. And so that is what I'm very much committed to doing. And Monica and UWN provides that platform. The book is providing that platform to show that, you know, I have a plaque that says, you know, well-behaved women don't make history, which is, I think it's probably like back there somewhere, but it's true. We're shit disturbers and we're proud of it. So I wear that badge with honor.
Great. I love it, Lauren. And, you know, I do believe that together we're stronger, and our voices, once united, collectively, we can make that impact. We just have to keep pushing forward. And, you know, that's one of my favorite quotes, for sure. Andrea, and yourself.
Yeah, so for myself, I mean, obviously my belonging work, that's like huge. But I think with belonging, I think the piece that I've really come to realize and why we struggle so much to belong, and each panelist talked about this today, we have this socialized behavior to avoid or run from conflict. And we've been socialized that when we experience something that is uncomfortable or something that we don't know, where it's different, we reject it, we exclude it, and we ostracize. And if we are to make change, we really do have to start getting more comfortable with constructive conflict. Like if we look at how so many people talk to their children about, don't play with kids that are mean to you, just play with someone else. What we're doing is we're actually endorsing avoidance behavior. You know, when you look at the amount of people that stop speaking to each other because they've had a conflict, you know, we judge, we blame, we shame, women more so than men. And that allows that cycle of rejection to continue. It's privileged. It has to do with patriarchal elements that we continue to use as means to control others. And it is a problem that we do need to change. We need to start being more constructive with conflict so that we can change the story and change the way that we respond instead of react to the conflict that we feel when there is discomfort. I think that will gravely help us with micro and macro aggressions, and it will allow us to open the door in so many different ways to shift a destructive culture into a constructive and a belonging first culture.
Wow.
Well said, Andrea, and I do think that you touched on this. We also have to include our youth. We have to empower our future leaders to participate in the conversation, but also to share our knowledge with them. So for those leaders that are, you know, hopefully we have the opportunity to share, that are listening, those ears are the ones that are going to help move those barriers and help drive that change for us. So thank you for, you know, also including that. And Carolyn, I know you did a fantastic job moderating. You're already doing such great work with Randstad. What are you hoping to drive change with and take action towards?
So this comes to the epitome of why I accepted the Chief Diversity Officer, right? I was really thrilled at the opportunity, but there were conditions that came with it. I said, I will do this if we are orientated towards action and we're going to move. I will have awareness as a pillar, but I will not have awareness as an outcome. Are you sure you want me to lead this? And our executive group we're homogenous right now. We have opportunities to change that landscape. We're all in. And they demonstrated that by unlearning and making a commitment in 2021 to be humble, to go learn. They're about to go on an ally journey to understand through our community partners, hopefully the place they feel the most uncomfortable, to go learn the experience. So I am looking at ED&I from a business perspective. Often ED&I has been bubbled up through human resources. I'm coming as the president of technologies on a business side, running a P&L, having the revenue, the EBITDA, et cetera. So it's the business lens that's coming, and I want to show not only our organization, but any of our partners and the economy at large, from businesses at large, how to embed D&I into the business strategy, not have it running parallel.
Awesome.
Beautiful. And I really do love the transparency piece that you touched on, because I think that all organizations should adopt that same transparency piece, because like COVID, I think you mentioned this before, Lauren, we're all in this together. We're just at different places. And we all want to strive for that goal, but if we can be transparent, that's when the learning comes. So having the brave conversations like we did this afternoon is how we're going to get there. And once again, I am very humbled to have you all a part of the Woman of Inspiration, Women Driving Change book. Thank you to Katie Dudtschak, Lauren McDonald, Andrea Carter, and of course our moderator today, Carolyn Levy. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to the epic journey ahead.
Thank you.
Ladies, that was fantastic. I have to say that my button disappeared somewhere, that I couldn't stop the play or the dog barking. So I'm just going to have to end the Zoom call. I don't know what happened to it. Technology is but you were able to see all of the transcription, correct, Lauren? So maybe it just froze on my side, but I'm just going to have to close off the entire screen. But before I go, I would really love to capture the moment, because I'm beyond excited for the collective voices that we have and the power that we have to make impact. So if you want to hold up your book, if you have it, I'm going to take one.
Not again with the book.
I know. You can wave, Lauren. All right.
Point at yourself. Be like, me.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, ladies. Have a wonderful weekend. And if I could, I just look forward to the next conversation and where we're going to take this, because it's going to be amazing. So thanks, everyone. Happy Friday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy Friday. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
I really hope to meet Andrea, Carolyn, and Katie some other time. And of course, you, Monica. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.